oh my gosh, like, this is me. I'm in this prison. No wonder I'm miserable every day. Like, I'm in this prison of becoming where I feel like I can't get out until I'm better, until I'm a better version of myself. So it was like, I'm like sobbing in front of this painting, realizing like I'm free. Like I can really just choose to be free. I can just choose like right now. And then I can choose tomorrow, and I can choose later this afternoon, and I can choose this evening, and then I can choose it again tomorrow morning. It's insane how we incarcerate ourselves in this box that does not even exist.
Today on the Big Fish Cares podcast, we dive deep with Lady Bec, a beacon of wisdom in the quest for balance, fulfillment, and self-discovery. As a writer, speaker, podcast host, and seasoned professional in the oil and gas industry, Bec embodies the essence of juggling life's critical aspects while savoring its beauty. In her groundbreaking book, Rediscover Yourself, Redefine Your Life, she unveils the 5 steps to fulfillment and the transformative concept of the Liminal Advantage. I can't wait to get into that because I've never heard that word before. Guiding us to realize that we're always perfectly positioned for our next big leap. Drawing on her life's experiences, including the invaluable lessons from her greatest teachers, her children, Bec is here to inspire us to relentlessly pursue ourselves, unveiling the path to a life rich in purpose and joy. Join us as we unravel Bec's journey, wisdom, and strategies to not just navigate, but thrive in the myriad of roles that we play. Don't miss this enlightening episode. Relentlessly pursue yourself, where the pursuit of self becomes the greatest adventure. How you feeling?
Are we having a staring contest?
How you feeling?
Good.
It's good to have you here.
It's good to be here.
Why'd you come here?
I have no idea. I've actually, since the moment I got here, I've been questioning my poor decision making.
But seriously though, how did you end up here?
I'm teasing you.
How did you end up here? What was the journey that led you to come here?
Wow. We just determined we only have like 45 minutes. And that's a long story.
All right. But let's do the more short version of how you found out about Benny and the Big Fish Cares podcast. And then yeah, we don't need the whole backstory of like your whole life. Not yet. We're going to get into that in a minute.
So it's just been about a few weeks ago. I came across your podcast through a mutual friend of ours, Matt Scaletti. Shout out, Matt.
Stay savage.
Stay savage. Yes. Yes. And Matt was on my podcast about a month ago. And I noticed, I had assumed that you were also from the Pittsburgh area. And a big goal of mine this year is to like make real connections with people that I could actually be in front of. You know, we travel all over the country. We end up in these rooms full of like thousands of people, strangers that we've never met. But I'm like,
and you're from like the woods down in like, what is it, Fayette County?
Fayette County.
I'm not laughing, people, but there's like a population.
He just laughed.
There's like a population of like 1,200 people in that county. I feel like.
Oh, it's.
Oh, I'm just kidding. It's bigger than that, but it's pretty rural.
It's rural.
Yeah, it's the totally county rural. That's southeast of Allegheny County, where Pittsburgh is. So just for the national audience that's listening.
Yeah.
But the title of this podcast, and I think your message really is relentlessly pursue yourself.
Relentless.
Yeah. And so what does that phrase mean to you?
Incessant. Just no matter what, like you're going to keep going. You're going to keep going after it. But this pursuit of ourself is like, this industry, when I say that, meaning personal development land, we find ourselves in all these books, hiring all these coaches, all these mentors. And a lot of us, I think, focus on, at least especially me in the beginning of my journey, I was focusing on these outcome-based goals. Right? So it's like, if I get this, then I'll be that. If I get more money, then I'll be happier. If I lose this much weight, then I'll be this, whatever. But then I just realized like we are always going to be in this unraveling of who we are. So it's not about getting to a specific point, but instead committing to yourself and saying, you know what, no matter what, I'm going to continue to relentlessly pursue who I am. And it's just never ending in there. It's never ending.
Never ending. It is like a vortex.
Like a black hole.
In
the best way.
A black hole in the best way.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So there's many people I feel like struggle with the idea of self-discovery and change.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who feels stuck and unsure of their next move?
Well, this is where we can get into this liminal advantage discussion.
Oh, we're going to get into that.
Perfect.
We're going to get into that.
So,
are we going there right this second?
So
is that where we're going?
We're heading there. This is going to be a great segue. So for
that's my fourth question. We're only on question number 2.
I love how organized you are. I respect it. I appreciate
I'm not really organized, but I have to be for the show because the audience tells me, Benny, you're all over the place. This is the first 50 episodes.
Yeah.
Like I got lost, you went on one thought and you never finished that. Can you somebody would DM me one time and they go you were on such a great track. And then all of a sudden you went, I said, yeah, I said, that's my brain. Well, no, I found something else that was even interesting to myself.
Yeah.
And sometimes I forget, most of the audience members have more of a linear brain and they are thinking what's next? Oh my gosh. And then me, I'm poof. Yeah. Rabbit, little bee.
Well, I'll make this line up and I'll make this trackable. So, and this is exactly my message right now. This is what I'm really focused on right now is for the people who feel stuck. You have to shift your perspective to realize that you're actually not stuck. It feels like the end. It feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But early in my, let's say more recent difficult years, I was seeing a therapist. And as I was talking to her about this, one day I'm am I really stuck? Or is this actually is this a new beginning? And I'm just not really sure where it's heading yet. But it feels stuck because I'm shedding this old part of me and I'm being forced to let a lot of this old stuff go. But my ego doesn't want to, right? I'm so attached to all of these other things. So it does feel like the end, and it should be the end for that part of you. So what she told me about was this term called liminal space. And she said, Becca, this is what you're experiencing. It's this thing, it's like a hallway between one area of your life and the next area of your life. But if you imagine yourself in maybe a hotel or something, right? Or a big office building, and you're at one end of the hallway and you're looking all the way down, you're oh my gosh, this could be overwhelming. What's behind those doors? This is so scary. What if something comes out of that? What if I can't find my way what if I don't make it? What if I collapse halfway through the hallway, right? But then I started to play with the idea of it's only me in this hallway. This is my hallway. And what's behind this door and behind this door and behind this door and behind this door? So I started to realize, although I felt stuck, or if somebody's feeling stuck, right? It's if you're here and you're breathing and you're showing up for another day, you have that opportunity to say, what if I'm just in the hallway? What if I'm just in between these two pieces of my life? And then what if I have an advantage? And we can move into that at some point too, which is this liminal advantage that I talk about in the book.
So the liminal advantage, I want to make sure I heard that right, is it's like a hallway. You're starting at one door. There's another door at the end. There's probably darkness in the hallway. And eventually, if you just walk through that hallway with a little bit of faith, is that what I'm hearing? That eventually there'll be light at the end of is it light at the end of the tunnel? Yeah.
So the liminal space is, in more practical terms, let's say it's a transition period. So let's say you're going through a divorce. You're suddenly unemployed. The pandemic.
Been there, done that twice. Not twice in the divorce. Been divorced and also been fired. So
yeah. So the pandemic was a large scale liminal space for all of us. It was oh my gosh, this thing happened. Now we're all in this new situation that we don't know how to manage. And we could have chosen to believe, right? This is the end, this is over. And many people did choose that route, right? It destroyed them. But then you have a lot of other people who you've probably heard people say, right? 2020 was the best year ever, even though all of this crazy stuff happened, you know, and all of these terrible things happened, it opened a door for people to see other aspects of their life.
It's so funny you brought that up because I just got done finishing writing my keynote for the EOS conference.
Woo woo.
And that is a major story in my keynote, is how COVID, it was like the second big story in my life. The first one was I overdosed in 2017. That was more acute, right? Like that was very like, poof.
Now.
And that was pretty much, and then COVID was more like this big, it was another, what I call God pause. Like God basically sits you down and he sits you down and says, hey, Benny, you just need to pause for a little bit and kind of like open your eyes and feel what's going around here, because you're running around too much like a chicken with your head cut off. You just need to be a little bit still, listen to yourself, and then figure out like how to move through that. And COVID was hugely transformative. I always say that word wrong. Transformative for me, and it sounds like it was for you as well. And I believe when you said like COVID was like that for everyone, I only think 10% of the people were actually aware. There's still the other 90% that still haven't actually came to an awareness that like it changed them too.
Well, and I think the default awareness for any liminal space is a negative connotation. And that's why I decided to run with this for my research and for the book, because in my own liminal space and learning of that definition, I wasn't necessarily negative about it. I was starting, after my divorce, I was starting to get excited about, like, wait a second, you're meaning to tell me that I can like move forward in any direction that I want to right now?
It's like a fresh start.
Yeah. I'm like, you're meaning to tell me that like I can totally make these decisions and end up somewhere drastically different. I was like, let's go, you know, but my world didn't, mirror that, you know, the world. And even if you Google liminal space, like right now, it's all going to be a lot of negative stuff.
I was afraid. I was actually afraid to Google it before this show because I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, you would have.
And so I figured, you know what? I just want to be like kind of naive to the word because I want to hear it and I want to ask like questions.
Yes.
And so like this is really cool because I feel like it's a word that I've never heard. Not that I'm like the most scholarly person, but I've read a lot of things in my life,
and
I've seen a lot of words before.
Yeah.
And I have a really good memory. I don't think I've ever seen that word liminal before.
Yeah, liminal space.
I can't. So my therapist is coming on the podcast. I cannot wait to ask her about liminal space.
You should. It's a psychological term. And it's like, you know, liminal space is when people have an existential crisis, when they're in between traumas, you know, they're in between phases of their life. It's just this, it's this space that a lot of people see as this like, I'm in the thick of it. I'm in the weeds. Please, God, get me out. But I'm helping people shift their thought process from that to, wow, like I'm actually not stuck. I'm right where I need to be. And this is opportunity.
Do you think everybody has to have a traumatic thing happen to them to have this what do you call it, existential, like
an existential crisis?
So is that like I'm assuming when you say existential crisis, is that like a negative?
Well,
like,
it's normally when you start to question everything you know as you know it.
So it doesn't necessarily have to. It doesn't mean like you have to like, you know, like for me, like, you know, have an overdose, get divorced. Like you don't really have to go through that to have an existential crisis, correct?
I would hope not, but are there people? Most people do.
Yeah,
they have to hit that God pause moment.
Yeah, what would you say the ratio is? Is like, you think it's like 90% of people have to go through something painful?
Yes, I would say the majority of people do not. They're too proud to learn from other people's mistakes.
What about the people out there? Because I've met a few of these people, and they're the ones that are the hardest people to read.
Yeah.
What are the people that had like these, for lack of a better word, I know there's no such thing as a perfect life, but they have a really good, like, just stable, linear, like, just
all the way?
Like, you know, great parents, great childhood, went to college, job, career. They're just steady. And, like, they're very just, they haven't had any big traumatic moments that happen to them. They haven't had any, like, super pain or, like.
Sure.
Like, how do those people find this liminal space, if they want to grow, or if they want to expand rather than just 2x their life, they want to 10x their life. How do they find that?
I mean,
because there are people out there like that, believe it or not.
Right.
I know me and you don't associate with that, right. But like, we don't know what that would be like. Because right. I feel like the more pain you have, the more chance that you have for like greatness. Mm-hmm. Almost. And I don't know if that's just because that's my story. Maybe that's a lot of people's story that I know, and I've seen like them go from straight up pain to like greatness.
Yeah.
It's almost like the more pain you're in, the more great you can become.
Right.
What about the people that are more in like the middle and like float along? I have a theory on that, but I want to hear yours.
I mean, what I would say first is that I don't totally believe that everybody that so many of those people exist versus they're not aware of the trauma that they may have been dealing with, or they've like been accustomed to so much trauma or behavior patterns that they just know that that's what their life. I mean, I've had certain clients over the years that they would very much tell you that that's their life until they started to be around other people who would share about their discomforts or the things that they've gone through. And then they're like, whoa, that's not normal. Like, and then they start to connect.
They've been covered up for so long.
Right.
Like little cover ups. It's not like nothing crazy, but like just little. Like,
they don't even realize that what they're experiencing is abnormal or unhealthy. And then the second thing I would say is, and I think I've mentioned this to you in prior conversation, but
You mean on our 3-hour lunch date that we had like not that long ago?
Yes. Do you remember I mentioned David Sutcliffe to you and Angela I? So I'm not sure if you got to look into them yet or not, but they teach they teach a lot of things, but the word that's popping up now is radical aliveness. So throughout the whole, like the training institute they went to is radical aliveness is this term. So what I would say then is I don't think that everybody realizes that this state of being radically alive is available. Like we are content with this mediocre life, and in no way do I mean materialistically. I'm talking like emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I want to be radically alive,
like enthusiastic.
Yeah, and it's like just pumping through you, like your blood is moving, and you're breathing, and you're here, and you're living. And a lot of people, I don't think that's demonstrated in their life.
So you know what people tell me all the time? Because people tell
full of energy.
Yeah, people tell me that all the time. Oh,
you're
Ben,
a life force.
That's just the way you are. That's just you.
I don't think
you're
so.
born that way. And I'm like, I think this was created.
Well, and I think and maybe I'm wrong here, but like I think that's an insult to tell somebody, like, I see in you that it was created, that it was a choice you made. And you kept making that choice, and that's how you are the way you are. Of course, were you given a little, pixie dust maybe in a certain way, or we all have our own unique, like, ways of being and superpowers and gifts and stuff like that? Sure. But I think that everybody can make choices. And my therapist had to, like, beat that in my head because, as you mentioned before the episode, before we started recording, people like us naturally deflect too. We don't want to take credit sometimes, or we don't want to like put the spotlight on us. And she was like, Becca, you made choices to get to this place. You could have chosen to go backwards and you didn't. You chose to go forward. And when I realized I chose that, then I'm like, I'm no different than anybody else. Anybody can choose this, but they don't know.
Well, I think for me, uniquely, I feel like the combination of two things happen. At 7 years old, I asked Jesus into my heart. At 7 years old, I remember that day like it was yesterday.
Wow.
And at the same time, the world like literally just started beating me up. Not for that, because like, I was just a kid, ADHD, broken home. My mom and dad were divorced, trying to deal with that. I was the oldest kid. There wasn't a lot of, I was always like seeking attention and approval. Mm-hmm. And, got fired a bunch of times. Just like when I got into my 20s, started doing selling drugs, trying to find acceptance, And for me, it was like the combination of the two forces together, like knowing that like I was meant for something more, like deep inside my heart, trying to figure out like what that was all about externally, and trying to get the validation of like others rather than of just God himself. And so for that, like, I feel like it was like that enthusiasm's always been there. And I'm now just finally like finding my my rhythm.
Well, and that's the thing. That's the relentless
Overnight,
pursuit.
overnight rhythm.
That's the relentless pursuit.
42 years later.
I know. But it's like so many people, ourselves included, I'm sure at some point in our life, like you said, we're seeking this external validation. We're seeking the wins in these material things. But the other part of this relentless pursue yourself is relentlessly pursuing the person God intended you to be. Like that's the language in the book, is the person God intended you to be. And we don't even know who that is. So it's not even a rediscover. Like it's this rediscovering, it's this uncovering, it's this remembering and going inward versus what a lot of us do, which is we're asking, hey, Benny, what do you think about this? Or I'm showing up in a certain way to please this group of people, or I'm doing this thing, even if it's against my own integrity and values, but I'm doing it because I want to fit in. And the moment that I took my, let's say for, just generally, you take your power back, you take your energy back, and you sit there and say, I just want to find out. Let me tell you this story real quick. When I had my kids, when I had my son, my first.
How old's your son?
He's 8 now.
I have a 9-year-old, so it's pretty cool.
It's like bizarre.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And my daughter's 6.
Especially when they go from like the boys, especially when they go from like 5 or 6 to like 8 or 9. It's almost like they get, when's the mustache coming? I'm like, holy cow. Like,
I told him, I said, he's really are you 16? Like, what is happening? And why are you so cute all the time? Like, why are you so cute?
Don't say that in front of his friends, Mom.
Oh, I've learned. We're in that area. We are.
I'm not even allowed to like stand out. Like I
can't at the pickup line and stuff.
So how about so we just moved closer to my son, so then that way he could get off the bus at my house. Right, and the first time I'm out there, like proud dad moment by the mailbox, bus comes, he literally sprints right past me.
He's like, I don't know this guy with the big fish on the shirt. What is he doing? I don't even know who that
guy is. And I'm like, and then I had to like ask him. I said, Sam, would you prefer me just to stay inside the house? And he's like, yeah, that's cool, Dad. I'm like, oh, so that's
I can't. And I'm like, I think I'm a cool mom. What do you mean?
But I think I'm a cool dad. I definitely am the cool dad. If anybody from Murraysville's like listening to this podcast, I'm definitely the coolest dad.
Well, and that's how I kind of feel. Like
I've seen all those dads. Those guys that are like on the sidelines, yelling and screaming at their kids. I'm thinking like, that's not cool, man. Stop beating them up so much, right? But all right, tell me your story about children.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Man, they're like little faces. They're just so cute. So anyway, when I had my kids, when I first became a mom, I remember, again, I didn't know it then, but I was having this like existential crisis. I was in this liminal space, but I didn't know what it was then. But everything that I knew changed. I had to choose between things that I never thought I'd have to choose between.
Like what?
Me going from somebody who, my career, being a good spouse, showing up in the best way for my children while still being a friend, while still being a sister, while still, the list goes on and on and on, right?
It's like it's going to the eye doctor, A or B.
And it's like, my brain was just like, why do I have to choose? Why is my external situation telling me I have to choose? It viscerally felt wrong. And it sent me into this awful experience. I mean, my postpartum anxiety and depression was, and that's like a whole other story and another passion of mine, but it was just not good.
What was the worst thing that came out of that? Or like, what was the worst feeling that you had? You can share.
I think the worst feeling, and I mean, I'm really open about it. I think the worst feeling is this, and it might sound like I'm deflecting here, but it was like the collective pain of every parent. I'm just like, how is it 2015, at the time, and like, I have to feel this way. Like it logically didn't make sense. It made me, the worst thing was it made me not trust myself anymore. And that is a hard thing to come back from, because I thought that I was doing everything. Well, I did do everything. I went to finish high school, had good grades, did all these extracurriculars, got into a good school, got a degree, had a great job, had the benefits, had the this, had the that, right? Like buying vehicles off the car lot shop floor, like the car dealership shop floor. It's like you would look at my life and be like, wow, Like,
So what did you feel like?
Did it.
But what did you feel like? What was like the word? What was the lowest? What was like the lowest point?
It collapsed. None of it mattered. None of it mattered. My little baby, Arlen, like a few days old, he didn't care what kind of car I drove. He didn't care what kind of clothes he was in, whether they were organic bamboo, whatever,
Yeah.
Like, he didn't care about what college degree I had or how much money was in my bank account. Like, he didn't care about all that. But the world, my whole life, was telling me, do these things. It was like the world whispers, like, do these things and I swear you'll be okay. Like, I promise you're going to win if you just do these things.
So when you felt that moment, did you feel like you just wasted like a bunch of your life chasing all these things that the world wanted you to do, when at the end of the day, all you wanted to do is probably hold your baby, right?
And when I realized, you're nailing this, because when I realized that when I realized the only thing my son needed was me, then I needed to find out who that was. Because apparently the person I had become had just collapsed around me.
Dead.
None of it mattered.
Almost like dead.
Gone.
Just like gone. Like just
gone.
Died,
and it was
but like
really this rebirth. But they say too, that when a baby is born, the mother is also born. That the mother is somebody who's totally new. It's not my quote. There's a quote out there.
I believe that.
So I'm like, okay, well, who am I? If my son doesn't need anybody but me, who am I? And how committed can I be to finding out who she is?
Was that the most transformative part of your whole journey in your life?
Yeah.
Up to this point, you think? Was that moment? Like, would you say, was that like during the first 3 months?
It was during my pregnancy, to be honest.
Oh, even like before the baby was born? Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable.
Because that was one of my questions, was like, was there any moments that felt particular like a defining moment?
Like a catalyst, for sure.
Yeah. What would have been the catalyst before that? So before you got pregnant, if you could look back at your life before that, what do you think the defining moment was up until that point?
That's a great question that I've never really reflected on. I would probably have to say when I moved out. I moved out when I was 17.
Why?
Just made no sense.
But why?
I've always loved to work. I started working when I was 15. And I just needed this independence.
Why do you think that was?
I don't know. I've always been a loner and independent, but I've always had groups of friends.
Do you have brothers or sisters?
I have a sister. She's a couple years younger than me.
Okay.
Yeah. But I wanted to be maybe it's a form of control. You know what I mean? My parents did split and divorced when I was an early teenager. My sister and I lived separately from them for a little while.
What do you mean by that? Separately?
She lived with my mom while I lived with my dad. So that was an interesting dynamic for a few years.
It's like a draft pick.
It's I'm going over here.
It's like the custody draft pick. Did your parents pick or did you guys get to pick?
No, we picked. So
you guys actually picked to split up and one's gonna go with dad.
Is bizarre.
It's because you like your dad. Did you like your dad more than your mom, or was it how did you guys pick that? That is fascinating.
To be honest, I'm not sure. I don't often talk about this.
How old were you?
Would have been junior high.
So you would have been 8th grade, 13,
something
14?
Like that. Yeah.
And then mom and dad get divorced? What they do? They come and tell you? Did you know they were getting divorced, or they have to have this crazy moment where they sit everybody down and say, did it come out of the blue?
No, I can't. Well, it definitely didn't come out of the blue. I can't really recall the details, and that might be for a reason.
Suppressing. Yeah.
It might be I've been wanting to do, I always mess up the acronym. What is it? EMDR?
EMDR.
Yeah. Have you done it?
The little tap therapy. No, but I know people that have.
Yeah, but I feel that would maybe help me get get some of these memories unlocked. You know, I've had some friends with those experiences.
Oh, I think that would help you tremendously, because that is very interesting that a child, I still consider you a child at 13 or 14 years old. Parents say they were getting divorced.
Yep.
And then I'm just curious, because I'm the most curious person on human earth, because I ask lots of questions. I want to know, like, I just want to know, like, do they say, well,
you're going here and you're going here.
And then like, do you guys swap on weekends, or like,
there was a time where I don't recall there being like, it wasn't like there was this like major, like divisive animosity thing. It was just kind of like, for me, it just felt like understood. It felt right. It just made sense that like I would go with my dad, and
because I could see like 50-50 where like both of you go to your dad's for a week and then you go to your mom's for a week.
Yeah.
Like as the siblings are together.
Well, and now that I'm thinking of it
I'm just curious,
mom
like what?
who,
That's
like
what
I have a custody schedule
I want to
now.
like actually talk to your mom and be like, how'd you let that happen?
Yeah,
like,
I have no idea.
Like what bet did you lose like during the divorce to split the kids up? Because to me, like, I don't know, that would be very interesting.
Well, I mean, we were old enough to
pick. I know once you're 13, you're allowed to like kind of tell the court where you want to go.
To discuss it, and we didn't even do any of that. Like we didn't even. There was no outside influence. Yeah. So it's way more like casual, maybe, than, even though it's not normal.
Yeah, no,
it's not like standard.
That's all right. I feel like nothing is normal.
What is normal?
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast. That's
a whole other year. But so I think like the original thought was, or original question was like a pivotal moment before having my children. So I think it was that like, okay, I'm going to move out.
You do it your way.
Yeah, I want to have my own, even though I'd had freedom, and you know, it's not like I lived.
Well, you were living with dad. Is that why you went to dad's house? Because usually the dads are the ones that'll let you live a little bit more free, because dads are always worried about themselves a little bit more. And so,
I mean, my dad's cool. You know, they're both cool. Though.
I know.
My mom's cool too.
I hear you. But there was a stint where as soon as I graduated high school,
Benny went rogue.
as soon as I graduated high school, I went and moved in with my dad.
Yeah.
Because like I knew I could, you know, my dad didn't have any. There was less rules. Like I didn't have to be home by like 11 o'clock at night. Though,
because like dads with their daughters, I think, might be a little different than dads with their sons.
And that's probably true too. And I'm going to that's why I'm like, I'm asking you questions to find out, like, because I have a daughter now, and I'm thinking like, what am
I going to do?
Yeah, because am I going to be like, I'm going to keep you on house arrest, basically. Because I'm going to have the sniper rifle out the door.
You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. I mean,
you wanted her to be free, but you also wanted to make sure she makes great choices.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and and it's interesting because I always really, do I want to say that I was like stubborn and bullheaded? Maybe, you know, just I trusted myself a lot is the point. You know, growing up, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to move out. I'm going to do this. I've got this. And then it was like this weird thing after becoming a mom and entering a serious relationship and all of this stuff where that part of me was like dismantled. So when you ask me on the other side of it, what was like the crisis, it was the fact that I couldn't trust myself. Like coming from, like I've trusted myself my whole life. And then to be in these series of relationships and events that led me to a place where I second guessed myself, it was like, I'm still recovering from
the goalpost changed for you.
You know?
So like the goal changed, because I think it sounded to me, you were chasing something, from what it sounds like, some type of independence, some type of freedom, some type of, hey, I'm going to do it my way. To all of a sudden, you have this now human that is connected to you. And again, I don't know what this feels like. I only hear the stories from the women that tell me like what this feels like. Yeah. And then you like your whole sense of identity changes because you're like, now you're connected to this human that like you have to love, nurture, take care of. And you're like, my goalpost just completely literally completely just evaporates. Unless you grew up your whole life, your goal was to be the best mom ever. But if you didn't think about that and all of a sudden it happens, now you're like in mom mode, that's probably got to be a tough transition. Well,
and this is something that, you know, obviously I take full accountability for the choices that I've made, but I think we do a very poor job, and I will die on this hill. Like, we do a poor job in this country preparing people for what they call the American dream. So my thought process as a young teenager was, I'm from one of the most economically deprived counties in Pennsylvania. Nobody that I know has ever made over like $40,000 a year. I'm supposed to just be content becoming a teacher or a nurse because that's what the college was telling me to do. And that didn't line up with me. Like, it just wasn't and funny enough, I do consider myself very much a teacher in my own way now, but it's like, I did not want to do that, and I just felt funneled like cattle, just like into this thing. And then I'm like, I go through this conveyor belt assembly line, whatever, and I excel. And I come out on the other side and I'm like, why am I so miserable? Like, why am I so depressed? Not to mention through the relationships that I've had that have, maybe contributed and made me feel a certain kind of way. But, I think the point is what you said earlier is becoming aware that we have the independence to not let our external circumstances force that. So I feel like the best gift that I can give to my children is to teach them how to continue to anchor into themselves and prepare them for the reiterations of themselves. Because even though now I do trust myself way more than I did 5 years ago, it's like interesting because I almost feel like I'm 18 again. I feel like I'm that girl. I feel like I've found that essence again. And if that's intact, then everything else will also be.
So you have the first experience, defining moment, when you're 17.
Yeah.
You have the next one when you have the baby. How old were you when you had the baby?
Early 20s, like 23.
Early 20s. So that was like, 5 years later, 6 years later. Mm-hmm. What about since then? Like this, it's like you're going into a new liminal advantage, right? There's a new hallway,
and I love that you're following
this. So like this is your third hallway. Well, because I feel like we all have these
over and over.
All of us have them. Even Cody has them. We needs to be more aware, right? He's just not probably aware of the hallways,
right? And so
I don't know if you really are Cody or not, but you probably are. But Cody's a lot more aware than most humans. But like, there's a lot of people out there listening right now. They're like, what are they talking about? Like I'm just like. But if you really look at your life, and that's why I say the defining moment, because like you can, like, all I need is one. And then we can start asking questions. All right, well, what was the defining moment before? Mm-hmm. And has there been a defining moment since? Because now, so we have the one at 17, we have the one at 23, and you're what, 31, 32 right now?
Thank you. I'm 34.
34. See, I'm bad at math. That's all that means. I'm bad at math. So like, has there been another one?
So this is what is interesting. And this is where like the research for the book has come and why I'm so excited about this, because those were two things that happened to me. Mm-hmm. Those were those God pauses that forced me.
Well, I think they're happening for you, but
it. Well, you'll see what I mean.
All right.
Since then, and I agree with that, life happens for us. Like, these things happen for us. But generally speaking, I didn't see them coming. I didn't contribute to them happening in a very intentional, conscious way. So since then, I've been creating them. And that's what I teach you in the book.
Creating defining moments?
To create your own liminal space.
Do you have to go into a darkness for that?
No.
You can do it through light?
Yes.
Teach me.
Teach you.
Yeah. For some reason, I feel like I'm addicted to the pain, because like I know the process to go from like pain to purpose and then presence.
It's
and
like
so for me, it's like, man, like anytime there's a painful thing, I'm like leaning in. I'm like pulling
ripping
back the covers, reading in and
what's
like
in there?
poking my head in, because like I've had so much practice with it.
Sure.
And I'm like, I don't want to say I'm getting good at it.
Right.
But I'm getting
familiar.
I'm getting really good at dealing with pain.
It's familiar. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, do I have to experience that the next 40 years of my life? Because it's not necessarily pleasant.
Right.
But it's like, that's like how I'm wired right this second. It's like what I know. It's like, so is there a different way to do it?
I think so. Because, I mean, what you're also describing is layers of resiliency. And that's never bad, because, of course, if something, again, I'm going to use the phrase like happens to you, like if something's out of your control or a situation brings you to this point that contributes in more ways than you do consciously to you being in this liminal space, then of course all of that you've built up is going to be extremely valuable versus the person who's maybe not had to practice being resilient.
I just thought of something when you said that.
What did you think of?
I think the way that you could do it from a place of abundance and love is when you have gratitude for something. Mm-hmm. But you really have to force yourself into that gratitude moment and rip that open and like really get yourself into it, which for some reason, I feel like it's almost easier sometimes to sit in the pain than it is for at least in my life. It seems like sometimes it's easier to sit in the pain for a little bit than it is to feel the gratitude, the abundance. Yeah, and I think that's probably the answer, but I don't know. What's your answer to that?
So, I mean, and that just made me think of, people say like fear's familiar, but faith moves forward.
Well, and then your hat says like faith and fear.
The faith over fear.
Which I'm going to ask you about that in a second.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just perfect right here. It's like we can choose. We can choose. But I mean, the way that I have been teaching, right, is like the biggest thing, and we've talked about it multiple times, is becoming aware. Like you have to be willing to become aware. First of what I talk about is the prison of becoming. So are you familiar with Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
We all know Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
Right? Did you know he was an artist? He's a painter.
No. Oh, I know he's been painting lately, right?
For the past handful of years.
Yeah, but like he just kind of like started doing that, right?
Yeah, and it's incredible. And I had the opportunity. I was in South Lake Tahoe a handful of years ago and saw a piece of his work. And I'm explaining this because it's kind of pivotal for this liminal advantage thing. And basically the image, and you can look this up, the title of it is Prison of Becoming. And you see this painting with like prison bar-esque vibe. And there's a hand reaching out of it with a butterfly on the hand. And it says, and in that moment, he was freed from the prison of becoming. And his description of this painting and the reasoning behind it was we all put ourselves in these prisons that make us feel like we just have to continue to move forward and like accomplish things. We have to become something else before we can be happy. So I mentioned that at the beginning of our conversation. So the first step is becoming aware of where you are and the fact that you are single-handedly locking yourself in your own prison every single day and being willing to let that go. Because to your point, if you are safe with the fear, if you feel like the fear and the pain's familiar, you're not going to want to leave that prison. You're going to be like, I'm cool with my anxiety. I love this depression. At least I know how to manage it.
Is that the painting?
That's it.
Wow.
That's it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. So the first thing is that.
Makes me want to go buy it if it's for sale, but it's probably not for sale.
Well,
because Jim Carrey doesn't really need money. So
he does sell his work at like 3 galleries in the world.
Like originals or just like prints?
A little bit of both.
Probably prints.
A little bit of both. And I heard he does like parties sometimes at his house where it's like this crazy amount of money, like a deposit, just to go. And I'm like, I would love Jim Carrey.
Well, I mean, the dude used to make $20-30 million back in the 90s making stupid comedies. And I'm sure
he's brilliant.
So I'm sure that he can charge $1 million to all of his rich Hollywood friends and have a little instead of a pampered chef party, they have a Jim Carrey.
I'm telling you though, I had a moment with this painting at the gallery.
What was it?
It was just because I was standing there as I read that description and they were talking about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me. I'm in this prison. No wonder I'm miserable every day. I'm in this prison of becoming where I feel like I can't get out until I'm better, until I'm a better version of myself. So it was like, I'm sobbing in front of this painting, realizing I'm free. I can really just choose to be free. I can just choose right now. And then I can choose tomorrow and I can choose later this afternoon and I can choose this evening and then I can choose it again tomorrow morning. It's insane how we incarcerate ourselves in this box that does not even exist.
So
it's weird.
And I get what you're saying because I'm kind of on the journey as well. Mm-hmm. But for someone that's listening right now, that's
what are
that all? No, that all sounds good because I feel like everyone listening, if they're truly aware, even right now, if you hear this,
you're
in a prison.
Yeah.
you just might not have physical bars around you, but you have the bars inside, right? That limit basically everything the way you do. So how does someone, if they want to get to be more like on the other side of that, how do they start that? Like, how do they start that process?
Literally, I know this sounds so cliche, but with everyone I've worked with, the biggest thing is accepting the prison. Like accepting it, like really, truly being like, I know where I am and I see that I'm here and it's okay. Because I've had people try all the steps, right? You read all the books, you spend all the money to go to all the seminars and the webinars and the coaches and the whatever, but they never totally accepted where they were. And they cannot tell anybody otherwise because you see it, because they're still stuck. They're just in like a higher maintenance prison, you know? It's like, that's great. Like, you know, you move from like this prison to one where you just like have more material things, or you have more exposure, or you have whatever.
So
like
the
whatever
prisons
you
are
thought
the prisons
you
are just getting nicer and cleaner and more high tech.
and
more,
it's deceiving because you think
that's the devil. That's the devil. Wow.
It's the world, right? The world tells us to go and do these things. Don't look inside, like don't look within. Don't talk about your feelings. Don't talk about your struggles. Like we're not going to do that. You have to become more.
So you have
accepting it.
So you have a new book coming out.
It is.
It's not out yet though.
No.
So when will it be out?
Summer
of 2024?
Yeah.
So it's coming out this summer.
A few months.
All right, because this podcast is going to be probably dropping in 2 weeks. So,
yeah.
I mean, by the time people are listening to this, it's going to be, you know, middle of March. So your book's going to be coming out May, June, July.
Yeah, around there.
Really sure.
Around there, depending on logistics, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
So the 5 steps to fulfillment.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
It's called Rediscover Yourself.
Rediscovering Yourself.
Redefine Your Life.
Redefine your life. But there's 5 steps to fulfillment.
Yes.
Inside that book.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to give you them today.
You can't tell us the 5 steps? That's so dirty. Did you just trick me? Come on the podcast.
But I'm going to give you the first 2.
Oh, all right. Give me the first 2.
So, and we've talked about them.
Yeah, give me the first one.
Subtly. So the first one is accepting that prison. It's accepting your prison of becoming.
Okay. What was the second one?
The second one is claiming your liminal advantage. And so when I say that, do you have a question?
I do, but go ahead.
Yeah. So when I say that,
I always have questions.
The claiming part, the accepting part is so important. I'm not saying like be aware of the prison, look at the prison, because here's what we do, right? I'm not saying journal about the prison, tell your friend about the prison.
Meditate about the prison.
Meditate about the prison, pray about the prison. I'm saying get in there. And I say this in the book, identify your cellmates. Like who's in there that you're afraid of leaving? Is it your anxiety? Is it your depression? Like who are you without that prison? Because that's what's scary, right? It's like if you're the person who's always been a nervous wreck, who are you when you're not a nervous wreck? If you're the person that's always been a mother, I have a lot of people who are like in the empty nesting liminal space who are just like,
you mean like people like 40 to 60 that are like kids are like getting out. You know?
Surprisingly, like coming into
kids
my Facebook
kids
group.
are moving out when they're 17. So like they
like what am I supposed to do?
Like now what?
But I have a lot of, believe it or not, a lot of women in that age range who were like, I have been Benny's mom my whole life and I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what to do. So you just have to get familiar. You have to really accept that prison. And then with that, you can claim this liminal advantage. So that word's also really important because what I'm saying here is once you get to that liminal space, this is what's so interesting. We all are perfectly positioned for our next move. And the reason is because, like, think about this. And Gary Vee says this, right? About there being like a, what is it, like 400 trillion to 1 that were even like born.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so now think about the fact that like that applies to literally every other part of our life. No one has ever had the history that you have had. No one has the future that you will have. No one's having the present moment that you're having now. So like, why can't we believe that we have an advantage? Why can't we believe that everything that's brought us to this moment is not to launch us forward? And when I was having that crisis with my therapist a handful of years ago and starting to think, I was just like this, I refused to believe it was going to be bad. I'm like, this has to be happening for my good. Romans 8:28. God will use it all to turn around for his good, for those who are serving his purpose. So, and no weapon, right? Like no weapon formed against us shall prosper. So I had to believe that this was for good and this was going to take me somewhere. But you have to claim that because again, it looks good, it sounds good, we can do that, but you have to get specific about what have I gone through that no one else has gone through. So there's prompts as well in the book when it comes out, but it's like, what are some of these skills that you have now because you went through what you went through?
Oh, yeah.
Like you went through it and now you have these things, these qualities, these traits.
I have this, in my gift, I really do believe it's just to be radically vulnerable and authentic and just be able to share. So that way, hopefully other people can then start to hopefully heal through my story. And then they have
great at it.
And then they have their story.
Yeah.
And then they're going to be able to help someone heal through their story because it was okay that Benny Fisher went first. And now it's like, oh, like,
you unlock the gate.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know, and like, he's okay. Like, look at him. Like, man, he's doing good because he does it. And so I'm trying to like that to be the thing. Like, it's like actually okay just to kind of let it all out, right?
Sure.
No shame.
Sure.
Just let it all out. Feel good about it. Let it go. So then that way you can kind of start new, right? Start fresh, new start, presence, good future. Start acting like that future self now. You know,
but imagine what your life would look like if you didn't accept that prison that you were in. And the other caveat,
well, God wouldn't let me check out. I tried to check out a couple times. Not intentionally, but like I should be dead. But I'm still here. And there's a reason for that. And then there's another reason why I also like, one of our friends in the roofing industry just passed away yesterday.
Wow.
And he was like, probably in his mid 40s and just a great human being, great heart. His name was Larry Richards. And I always like every time someone passes away, it's like another God moment, like pauses me right in my tracks and be like, all right, well, I'm still here. What am I supposed to be doing while I'm here? I'm supposed to be like, I'm supposed to be getting it out, right? I'm supposed to be helping more people. I'm supposed to help myself so I can help more people. And like, that's the mission, right? Like while we're on earth, I believe. So I have 3 questions.
Okay.
They're all over the place.
Great.
I'm going to start with one. I'm going to write the other ones down so I don't forget. Future with stories and all right. So liminal advantage question, future with all these collective stories that we're sharing. And then I want to know about God. All right. So the liminal advantage, how often, and I'm sure this is going to be different for everyone, but if you know that you have to go through the liminal advantage to get to the
liminal space
to get to the next level, What's a healthy? How often should I seek the liminal advantage? Because because there's like this thing where it's like, all right, man, that was a lot of work. That was hard. I got through that. I just want to chill for a little while, man. I just want to be cool, man. Like I don't want to have to go through that again.
Yeah.
But if I know though that like that liminal advantage is kind of like going to the gym, like if I go, like I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to feel better. Like how often do I need to go into that liminal advantage, that hallway to exercise that? Like what is healthy? How do you know when it's time to go to the next hallway?
So, I mean, look at it this way. Like the liminal space is that journey. The advantage is kind of like the catapult. So it's like right now you have a liminal advantage to catapult you through this next phase. And then hopefully if you get through this liminal space in the way that you kind of like intend with this momentum and these new skills and all this stuff, then you've got this like next layer advantage, right? You're just like constantly, like you're saying, like you're going to the gym, like you're not going to like go to the gym today if you've never gone to the gym and pick up like 100-pound dumbbells and like try to do something, right? You're going to increase that, but you're doing it intentionally too, because anyone, even if you're not a personal trainer or know anything about it, you would probably try the 5s and then the 8s and then the 10s. You're not going to be like 550. And that's what we do to ourselves in our life, right? It's like you have the skill set at 5, but we want instant gratification and we're not willing to wait it out. We're not willing to let things prune away or hone our skills. So we're like, well, I can lift the 5 and he's lifting in the 50s, so I'm just going to go lift the 50s. It just doesn't make any sense, right? It's like very, very hard to do. Or people will do it and then you end up in these super high stress situations, and you're like, why is this so difficult for me? It's because you might not have the skill set yet, and that's okay. But you build through that liminal space intentionally. So to answer your question about a healthy amount of time, again, this is something else that I've been working with for a while. I think everyone will ultimately find their own way, but I work on a 4-month quarter, I call it. So we all know a quarter's 3 months. But in the role that I have in the oil and gas industry, which is like a
trimester
story. So it's like, I call it the 4-month quarter.
But is it just a trimester?
No, it's 4 months.
Yeah, no, which is a trimester.
Yeah.
Right?
I like the 4-month quarter. Leave me alone.
It's a 4-month quarter. That's interesting.
4-month quarter. Doesn't that sound good? Here's why.
That's going to blow people's brains for a second.
Here's why, though. Because we have to leave room for the handover. So, and again, you have to be aware. You have to be willing to create some sort of loose strategy about where you're heading. You're not just going to if we're creating our own liminal space and not waiting for life to do it for us, we get to curate this. We get to be intentional. So I curate these 4-month quarters with a handoff in between. So it's like a normal.
That's a lot.
Every 4 months. I've been doing it for years. But across different parts of your life.
So you have hallways every 4 months that you're trying to go through.
Well, don't you?
Probably, but not, man.
You just have to become aware of it.
I guess.
I'm trying to collapse time in a very succinct way.
Yeah.
To get me from one place to another place. And this is the key. As humans, we like progress. We love progress. We love to be able to look at what we did.
So you're taking bite sizes. You're taking bite sizes. I think with me, and this has been the story of my whole life, like I'm looking to try to eat the elephant at one bite.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to every 3 years, I'm trying to do one of those because I'm trying to do a big bite. I think every
and that's okay. I know. That's your liminal space.
I know, but the way that you do it, I kind of like. It seems more manageable.
So I also talk about this thing just briefly about lids on pots. This is another funny thing. My girlfriend
That sounds like a keynote.
Lids on pots.
Yeah.
It may end up being, and I'll have to shout out my friend Nicole, Sunbelt Rentals, Big Green. She works for Sunbelt, but she taught me this thing, lids on pots. If you imagine a stove, right? And you've got the big pot and you've got the little pot and you've got something in the oven and you've got something over here in the air fryer. That's life, right? So again, going back to my crisis of I'm a mom now. I just quit my job. Who am I? What am I doing? The world's telling me I can only be a mom and I should just be a mom and I should be so happy that I'm a mom. But I was feeling guilty because I wanted more. I knew I was meant for more than just motherhood. And it's taken me a long time to accept that that's okay, but everybody has a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah.
So the other thing I say a lot is let's balance all the most important things in life but still enjoy them, because so many people are balancing things, but their life is awful. They're upset, they're stressed, they don't know what they're doing, when they're doing, they have no boundaries. It's just it's a disaster. And we would say then all the pots are spewing over, you don't know where the lids are, you don't know what's going on. So you kind of have to think about life like that. It's in my 4 months, I also still have annual goals and bigger goals, but it's at any given time I have a pot that's right in front of me. Maybe I need to be stirring it every day, until it's done. And then I'm done with it and I move it off the stove, right? But in the meantime, I have these other things simmering because I'm not going to give them up, right? Because even just that little bit of attention over several weeks is going to get me further ahead than if I stop everything, which is what a lot of people do, right?
Yeah,
it's I'm going to work on this project only. But then your family's suffering, your friendships are suffering, so you have to, it's planning, it's strategy, it's project management for your life.
So I feel like the podcast for me is one of the pots in my life.
Because it's always going.
But sometimes I wish that it was the main pot in front of me because I do enjoy it. And I think I can make it way better and I could go out and find even cooler and better guests. And I don't know, if there's even such a thing, but I don't know. And sometimes I think that's what I'm meant to be and do. But then I have these other epiphanies that no, I'm meant to be and do something else. It's and so I do see that with your, And Gino Wickman says in the EOS life, time for other passions, right? And Gary Vee also talks about and, not or.
Right.
And so like when you talk about being a mom, being a business person, being a podcaster, being a speaker, being an author, it's like, dude, like, why can't you just do them all?
Because being all of those things is in pursuit of myself.
Yeah.
Which then makes me a better mother.
Yeah.
It makes me a better friend. It makes me a better business person because I'm fulfilled.
All right. My next question.
Love it.
That was great. So now that we have the internet and we have all of this collective, I feel like over the last 20 years, because me and you both, pretty much grew up, I'm a lot older than you, 10 years older at least. But we've grew up in a space to where like the internet has made sharing this types of stories and information with podcasts and books and all this stuff. I feel like the world is starting out. There's a lot more Bennies and Beccas out there, right? And so what do you think the next 20 years is going to look like as more of us share our stories, help other people heal? What does the world look like in the next 10 to 20 years due to the fact that we're doing this? And this has never been done before.
Right. As far as just like sharing
these stories, like for instance, like these might have happened, but like it was with one, kind of like, how you're like the village, your group.
Yeah.
It was kind of private, kind of like closed door, kind of like community based, like, doesn't really, unless you go on the internet, it doesn't really spread, which is okay. But that's how pretty much the last, 2,000 years was. What do you think now with like, we have the villages online now?
Sure.
How do you think that's going to affect humanity?
I love it. And my hope is that it normalizes it all, because it's really not, I'm not an extremist as far as like, do I think that we all need to be like off the rails, like crying in our meetings every day, and like having kumbaya moments, because that's like not the point. You're like missing the point sometimes. But what I would like to see, what I hope is happening, is that more people are accepting it and becoming aware that like we're humans. We're humans having an experience here.
Yeah, it's like
and that the lights will come on, right?
Yeah, it's like heal, live, experience, heal, live, experience. It's like you're doing that like constantly, but they are separate.
Right.
And all together, but you're right. It doesn't have to be so acute.
Right.
Like it's not like we have to talk about this stuff all the time, because this is deep stuff.
Right. It is deep stuff.
For most of the world, and they're probably like, oh,
Yeah, but I'm even saying,
Benny's a little woo-woo nowadays is what I've been told.
And I've been the same.
But it's okay for females to be woo-woo.
Apparently.
But for like males, like it's weird.
Apparently. But I'll say, speaking from someone who's been in the most like male
what, oil and gas?
Oil and gas.
Oh, you don't think roofing's more male?
Well,
come to the roofing side, chick.
Well, from a female perspective,
no, I got you. They're both very male dominated, blue collar workers.
And I'm like almost always the only female in the room, and have been for 13 years, and it's like the way that we communicate in the industry now versus then. I mean, I know companies that are investing tens of thousands of dollars in emotional intelligence training for their employees. Personal development and leadership has become like huge. They're doing like, for lack of a better word, like leadership retreats and things like this, where these things are being talked about. It's like, how do we become better leaders? How do we influence people? How do we create safe spaces for people to talk about it? And being in safety, to nerd out here a little bit, with occupational safety and health, it's like, we have more money, more technology, more information than we ever have before, but people they're still getting hurt more and more and more by the year. So I've been saying this for a long time. We need to treat people like people. There's a human element when it comes to preventing injuries and mental health issues in the workplace that you can't like checklist your way out of. You can't SOP your way out of it.
Yeah, it's more of a heart issue, not a brain issue.
Right. So that requires our managers to be more like leaders.
Well, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but I had an epiphany about 6 months ago. I was at a workshop for couples with Brittany down in Dallas, led by Ann Shu, who does this course on empowered families. And she asked me the question, or asked us the question in our workbook, like, what's your decade dream? And I've always thought about that for business. And I've thought about it a little bit for my own personal life, but it really made me think. It's like, and I'm on that same kick where I think like emotional intelligence is what really from like a business standpoint and from like a life standpoint, when I really started to understand that like I could actually control that. Like I can like change my emotional intelligence. I probably have a book around here somewhere, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Also the Gary V book 12 and a half talks about this a lot. But I do believe that once you have a higher level of awareness, right, for yourself and for others, that you can then start to lead change and really start to help people. And I've hosted my own workshops, my own events for, my team here at Big Fish Contracting. But I have a dream to where like, I want to teach 100 other entrepreneurs how to lead their own workshops and retreats. So that way they can lead their own families, their leadership teams, their communities, because I believe that in 10 years, with like AI and technology, we're going to crave connection even more. And the people that are going to have to provide that connection are going to be those visionary entrepreneurs that like, first of all, have the resources. Second of all, have the skills,
the experience.
They went first, right? Like they've already, they've made it safe, right? And be able to create those. So that's kind of what I'm working towards for the next 10 years. But my third question, the last question I want to wrap this up with. You have the hat, faith over fear. Is that what that means? Faith over fear?
Sure does.
All right. And then you talk about God a lot.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your journey with God and being a Christian, and tell me a little bit more about all that, because I feel like I don't really know that part of you as well.
So the highlights are I was raised Catholic, never really understood or knew that I could have a relationship with God. It was very like technical. It was, you go to church, you do some things, and then you leave. Yeah, it was just very
more brain, less heart.
Brain, and a lot of confusion in that brain, and also a lot of like, seeing a lot of like hypocritical behavior. Like I was confused. I'm like, okay, we're supposed to be feeling this way, but all of this stuff's happening behind closed doors and no one's talking about it. They're just like coming to church, or when we're in front of people, we act and behave a certain way. And then all of this stuff happens behind the scenes. And I can never totally wrap my head around that. Still can't sometimes, But I always felt this call, and I always felt this relationship with God. But no one was around to teach me how to cultivate it or what to do with it. So the long and short of it is I did end up in this, and I feel like I do have to acknowledge this. I ended up in this several years of this like new agey type situation where a lot of my beliefs, a lot of my coping mechanisms and skills were really anchored into like all of these different things that I now think, that I now know, I use way more discretion around. And really the only thing that I need now is my prayer, my worship, like the praise, the Christian community that I've been so grateful to find some friends who really challenge me. Really challenge me. But it just, nothing else makes sense without God. Just nothing else makes sense. There's no way that on my own strength alone, I've been able to get through my life, make the changes that have been made in my life. Have I made the choice? Yes. But I believe when we make these choices in alignment with the person God's intended us to be, there's no other choice but for God's favor to be on that. And then that's where that momentum, in my experiences come from. But it's been a battle, and it's required me to surrender in ways that are uncomfortable.
Give me one example.
Uncomfortable. Just for one that people can relate to, taking like big financial risks, big financial leaps. Just like, okay, God, you seriously? Like, we're doing this now? We're doing this here? Or having difficult conversations with people, just like out of the blue. Like, people have been a really big part of my life, knowing that I just can't do this anymore. Or I haven't drank in about 18 months. That was a big issue. Not that I ever really think that I had a major problem, but it was something God was calling me to do. And with that goes all the friends that I once had in those situations. And that's hard because you start to realize where you lie in other people's lives as well and how they prioritize you. So it's hard to let those parts of you go. But I stand firm in knowing that God will continue to get me through, and that I have to shed those parts of me because it's for my good, and hopefully for the good of the people that I have the opportunity to impact and share my story with. Yeah. Those are my thoughts on that.
have so many questions. I have so many more questions. Dang it. I like to keep these to an hour.
Dun, dun, dun.
I'm going to ask you. I got one more. I probably got two more questions. Okay. So, who is God to you?
Like
if someone asks you like who God is, like, because there's different people have different definitions of like God. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you define God? Like, who is God? Like, is God a person? Is God like just a spirit? Like, tell me like what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, I do believe in God in the context of the Bible and in the context of the Christian faith. So I believe in God and the Holy Spirit is this like all-knowing, everywhere being that's just like constant and just there.
What's your thoughts on Jesus? Like on who Jesus is? Jesus was I believe that biblically, like I believe that Jesus was here. I believe Jesus impacted a lot of people. I believe that the gospel is real. I believe that Jesus died and resurrected. I believe Jesus is still like available. Yeah. So you believe like in the three, like God,
yeah, and
then like Jesus, and then like the Holy Spirit, like as like just like a collective, right?
Yeah.
But just different ways for us to like connect.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just curious because it's because everyone reads the Bible. I think everyone, even the people that try to disprove the Bible, I feel like everyone's read it, or at least parts of it. Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Maybe they haven't.
I don't think so.
I guess I'm naive.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Because I grew up with the Bible since I was a very little boy. So.
Yeah. And I wish that I did, but even though I was in church all the time, like I did not have the context of the Bible, and I'd always rather talk to people who have, and I'm still very much learning, I'm still very much trying to discern, but I think sometimes in the details of it and the things that people like to argue about, like we're missing the biggest
That's the brain.
part.
That's the brain and not the heart.
Yeah. Which is like, God is ultimately love, and that we're made in his image, and sometimes we don't act like it, myself included. So like my biggest conviction, even like praying before this, on the way here, I was like, God, just like, please speak through me and help me to represent you, because I don't want people to see me necessarily. I want people to see the change that God's done in my life. Because again, was I the one who woke up and did the thing? Yes. Did I make the decision? Yes. But I've been very good and very obedient and very practiced in my discernment, so that when something comes, it feels like an order. It's just like, we're going to do this. And there really is no question. I'm like, okay, let's go. And that's taken a long time to get to that point, because sometimes it's super scary.
Yeah, but you're still really young, so that's really awesome. I mean, that you've been able to experience that, because you'll be able to share that for the rest of your life. So
I hope so.
You have an incredible story.
Thank you.
So I really appreciate you being here. Is there like one question that you wish I would have asked you that I didn't ask you?
I thought this was great. No, I had no expectation.
All right, I was just curious.
Yeah.
All right.
It's awesome.
If someone wants to like get a hold of you, if they want to like find out more about your book that's coming out, your podcast, like what's the best place to find Lady Bec?
LadyBec.com. LadyBec.com has all the information. Join my private Facebook group. I'm there a lot. They're always the first to know.
I always thought about doing a private Facebook group, but man, they're so hard to manage.
Mine's super casual.
I know, but I always feel like I would like.
Penny has to go big.
It's not even that. I just feel like I'd have to be in there either every day, and then all of a sudden I would do like a spurt where I'm in there all the time, and then I would like dip out for 2 months and be like, they would be like, where'd he go?
Yeah.
Even though they see me post on my more public wall.
Yeah, and that's okay.
But I always thought about having an inside
I've
group.
had mine for like 8 years, and that's definitely been the journey with it. I'm glad that I've kept it.
How many
all
members
this
are in
time.
there?
We've got like 2,000 people.
Oh, wow. It's like a little church service going on in there.
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. And it's called Virtue and Victory now. It's
changed a lot.
The title's changed a lot, but that's based off of Proverbs. So it's like, how can we become the most, virtue is such a cool word. How can we become the most virtuous and victorious version of ourselves? Because we're allowed to win, we're allowed to be victorious.
That's it. That was a great episode. Hope you guys got value out of this. If you have questions for Lady Bec, drop them in the comments below. If you got value out of this podcast, please share this with a friend. Send it to somebody that you love. We're always looking to make a bigger impact on the world. We appreciate you tuning in. We'll be back with another episode 2 weeks from today. So stay tuned.
Thank you so much.